Let me tell you a short story about how we at Agile Dynamics came to select Coda as our only no-code platform to build a practice around that we would offer to our clients for automating workflows. So first, a little bit of background. Agile Dynamics is a very small consultancy. Our goal is to take the Scrum practices from IT and apply them to back office processes, particularly in the industries that are regulated by the FDA, the FAA, and GAP, and those people who are using ISO 9000. That means that we take your standard operating procedures, we document them, we automate them, put them under a change management system, and then the regulatory authorities can come along and audit them and certify them as being compliant with the regulations that you have to comply with. When it comes to automating our workflows, we've three options. We sometimes build web applications using a fairly standard web app development environment. We do lots of Excel automations of workflows. And recently we've started looking at no code and other integration tools to try and produce something that is as quick to develop as Excel spreadsheets, but has a better user interface. But we hit a problem. Our first three projects, we use Bubble, AppGyver, and Thunkable as the no-code platforms, mainly because they offered very good UI designer environment, and we thought that improving the user interface was the big improvement we wanted over Excel. And also, they used a visual logic paradigm. And our belief was that no code meant no typing. And so we were looking for things that had a visual paradigm. But it didn't work. Our clients were not happy with not just the results, but their ability to take on these platforms and use them and get the same performance that they were getting out of the Excel approach. So, to explain this to us, one of our clients showed us this cartoon, which I'm sure you've seen before. And they were saying to us, look, you guys develop data models that are over engineered, third normal form. You handle all of the edge cases, all of the corner cases, and it's very sophisticated. And then your developers come along and build a load of code, but they don't know the underlying operating environment and the SOP at all. So they produce something that has bugs. And we raise Jira tickets for the bugs, and then your developers go off and they fix the bugs. But it's still not quite what we wanted. In the meantime, our business people who know the SOP extremely well and know how to use Excel come along and produce a working solution using Excel. They take half a dozen tables, they take a few dozen formulas, they sprinkle in some VBA macros, and they've got a solution that works. And we're happy enough with that. And that then became our paradigm for what is it we're trying to do with no code. We're trying to replicate this phenomenon of the tractor tire as opposed to the over engineered approach that just didn't seem to be delivering what they wanted. However, when you look at the world of no code, it is very confusing. And trying to come up with a way of selecting which tools are better and which ones we wanted to use and so on was very confusing. And so we went back to basics and said to ourselves, why is it that the Excel automations were doing better than JavaScript? And the real reason was because one person who knew the business operation extremely well and was an expert in Excel spreadsheets could put together a single automated workflow in a matter of days, whereas it was taking us in the traditional development environment several weeks. The other advantage they were getting was that they were able to handle changes in the SOPs, and they do change fairly regularly, quite easily. And within a few minutes, they could modify their Excel model to handle the change. For the JavaScript approach, they had to raise an IT change request ticket and then wait for developers to come along and work on it. And the one that really impressed us the most was this thing of zero defects. They really didn't seem to deliver any defects in their final workflows. With Excel, They did a small amount of testing and they seemed not to have any bugs, or if they did find bugs in the testing, they were fixing them almost immediately. Whereas in the JavaScript world, we were doing tons of testing and we ended up with lots of bugs. So we thought, what is it about the spreadsheet environment that's giving them these advantages? And we came up with these four paradigms that were causing Excel to give them this great power that they had. The first one being that they would simply go in and create a data model as a set of tables. What is what you get? They just make a bunch of tables and the data is stored in those tables in situ. In other words, they have created the data layer intuitively without having to do a lot of analysis and SQL or anything like that. But then within those tables, they also incorporate the business logic layer. All the formulas and the macro buttons are embedded within these tables so that if you ask the question, where do I go to change the way such and such a thing is calculated? The answer is you go to the table and there you'll find the formula and you can change the formula. The other big advantage they got was that they also had, at the end of all of this, a way for users to edit the data. You go into the correct table, you click on the thing you want to change, and you edit it. They were able to create protection on the fields that they didn't want people to edit, but basically the whole presentation layer is now encapsulated inside that one powerful metaphor. Whereas, of course, in the JavaScript world, we were creating third normal form data models. They were being pulled in using SQL into JSON objects inside the program. JavaScript statements were used to implement the business logic. And then a combination of jQuery, HTML, and CSS was being used to try and make all of this visible on the screen and handle the interactions that the user had with their data. And so it was much more complex, much more prone to errors, and took longer to develop. And then the other advantage was that they were putting their documentation into the same Excel spreadsheet. So all the diagrams, checklists, reference material, process descriptions, and so on were all contained inside one object, the Excel spreadsheet, which made it much easier for them to modify those and keep them up to date. And it made it easier for the auditors to find everything they wanted and to provide the certification. In the JavaScript world, we were having to try and integrate in wikis and content management systems, and trying to keep them in sync was always a problem. Finally, in the Excel world, you put your logic in the form of single formulas that have no side effects and they're automatically recalculated. The dependency graph within Excel automatically handles all of the recalculation whenever data changes. And we reckon this is the major reason for them being able to do this without any defects creeping in. It allows non-developers to build sophisticated business logic in a way that's easy for them to understand. Whereas in the programming world, the developer is responsible for manually making sure that everything gets calculated at the right time and in the right sequence and gets recalculated again whenever anything changes. I should point out, though, that you can't do everything, of course, using no side effect, purely functional programming metaphor. So in the case of automations and special actions, they were able to create macros, but they had very strict rules. They only allowed a macro to have a single purpose, to have only a few lines of code, and to execute very briefly. And they then use these single purpose macros to handle data coming in and going out to other applications, adding and deleting rows and columns and moving data about, and doing special calculations that did require side effects. And by keeping their macros very short and simple, they avoided being caught up in complicated logic that created defects. Now, this does require you to use Visual Basic, which is a special knowledge, but it was well distributed among the teams, this capability of doing Visual Basic. And with the macro recording capability, you could get started fairly well. So these four paradigms apparently were the source of the magic that Excel was giving them. So now we wanted to use those paradigms for selecting a no-code tool that could achieve the same results. And so with that first one, you immediately remove from your consideration a huge number of no-code tools that just don't give you this table paradigm. The ones that do, that are popular in the marketplace, are Airtable, Notion, Coda, AppSheet, Fibre. I'm sure there's others as time goes on. But instantly, with this one criteria, you cut the field down to a handful of options. The next one cuts it down even more, being able to put your documentation and your business logic all in one place, and that includes video, audio, diagrams, and so on. Really, there's only two contenders. You're down to a two-horse race, Notion and Coda. Now, when you go to looking the formulas and the formula language and having no side effects and automatic recalculation and all of that, you're back to the usual suspects, Airtable, Coda, AppSheet, Fibre, and Notion. Although Notion is now down at the bottom of the list because its formula language is really very difficult, particularly for Excel whiz kids. They look at the Notion formula language and they do not find it attractive. And then finally, you want to be able to create simple macros, or in Coda, you call them actions. And Coda jumps to the top here immediately because not only does it allow us to do this very easily, but it uses the same formula language to do both the actions and the formulas. Airtable, Fibre, there's others out there that do allow this, but there's no question that Coda ends up being streets ahead of the competition on this one. And as a result, you have only one platform that scores on all of the criteria, and that's Coda. So we ended up with a situation where there was no other alternative. Coda is the platform that we have built our practice around, and we are in the process of converting our clients from Excel to Coda for this particular reason. So if we go back up to our original cartoon, we've now replaced the tractor tire with Coda because there is one single clear winner when you use these particular paradigms, these particular criteria to decide what no-code tool you want to use. And that's how we got to be in the situation we're in now. Thank you.